Hello everybody and welcome back to another video of me talking over random coaster POV. We'll be counting down my top 10 least favorite coasters I've ever been on. The rules here are relatively simple. It can be defunct and the version I rode will be the version I will count. So like if there's a ride that was restored and it's much better now than when I rode it, it doesn't matter. From when I rode it is what the list will be judged on. So now it's time to be super negative. Again, like always, and talk about my 10 least favorite coasters of all time. Coming in at number 10 on this list is Firebird at Six Flags America. For those of you who don't know, Firebird was originally named Iron Wolf and was at Six Flags Great America and was built as the first coaster of popular coaster manufacturer B&M. The main problem with that being that this ride is over 30 years old, and 30-year-old coasters aren't exactly always the greatest. Case in point, this ride. While looking at the ride itself, the paint looks new and everything around the ride looks decent, including fire effects that sometimes work. The issue is that it's at Six Flags America, so the ride is extremely rough. And while B&M does have a bit of a reputation for having slight rattles on rides, this ride has a lot more than a rattle. It is shaking you violently from side to side with the old B&M over-the-shoulder restraints that just hit your head so much. Overall, the layout is fine, and just looking at it, the ride looks pretty decent, but if you actually go on this thing and ride it, it is nothing but pain and suffering. Okay, maybe not too much suffering, but compared to the rest of the rides on this list, this ride is a masterpiece. But hey, at least it's not a stand-up anymore. Foreshadowing. Coming in at number 9 on the list is my second favorite red coaster in the back of King's Dominion, Anaconda. Anaconda really is a coaster I don't have all too much to say about. It's just a bad aero custom looper. And on top of that, it's also a long aero custom looper, and most of the time, with the exception of like Loch Ness Monster and Tennessee Tornado, a long aero looper means it's a worse aero looper. The layout is stupid, the restraints suck and give you lots of headbanging, and I mean, come on, it's pretty much everything not good about a coaster. Except I think the scenery over the water is nice, but it'd be a lot nicer if they put a replacement here or just got rid of it in general. I would say this ride is a good spot for a new coaster if it wasn't for the fact that there's a giant plot of unused land right next to it. Oh, come on, B&M, not you again. You make such good rides. Coming in at number 8 is Vortex at Carowinds. Yet again, Vortex is another B&M, but instead of being a sit-down, this time it's a B&M stand-up, everyone's favorite model of ride. And while being a stand-up doesn't make it inherently bad, the fact that it's a rough coaster and it just has such a short and pointless layout does make it bad. It's not as offensively rough as Firebird, but the elements on the ride and just the fact that you're standing up pushes it to number 8. But hey, at least this is the consensus worst B&M stand-up, right? Coming in at number 7 on my list is a coaster that came in at number 3 on the world's worst roller coaster list I made. So, I mean, at least I thought it was better than most people did. It's still really bad. Time Warp at Canada's Wonderland is Zamperla Volaire. Zamperla Volaires are very odd rides. They stick you in a weird flying type restraint, but unlike a B&M Flyer, it has like a weird cage behind you, and it just makes no sense. The layout isn't any more sensical. It's just a bunch of turns with 2 heartline rolls. If you saw my Canada's Wonderland video from not too long ago, you can hear this ride rattling pretty bad, and you can feel that. Your head, thankfully there is padding next to it, but it just gets banged to each side of the cage, and it's just not fun at all. But hey, at least it's not the 3rd worst coaster in the world, in my opinion at least. Yikes, Canada's Wonderland, that's 2 misses in a row. Coming in at number 6 is Mighty Canadian Mindbuster. In theory, Mighty Canadian Mindbuster seems pretty okay. It's an old PTC Woody from the 80s, which is a lot newer than actually a lot of the other PTCs, like Comet, which I don't think is too bad. But I don't know what's up with this ride, but it is the single roughest wooden coaster I've been on in my entire life. I wouldn't say it's the worst wooden coaster because it's not nearly as painful as some other ones, because the layout is literally just a few airtime hills, a turnaround, a few more airtime hills, and then a helix. The only saving grace of this ride is that the layout is boring, which is not a good thing. But like, there's some airtime, not that it matters, because as I was saying, this ride is extremely rough and obviously will give you a headache afterwards. So if you love headaches and boring layouts, this ride is for you. Coming in at number 6 is Grizzly. And because for some reason KD doesn't have an official POV of this ride, this footage is from Battle for Metropolis Expert. When I said about an update making a ride better, I was mainly referring to Grizzly, because I've heard pretty decent things about the Gravity Group retrack of this ride. But the thing is, I went on this in, I believe, 2019, and it was absolutely not fun at all. Like all bad wooden coasters, this ride is extremely rough. I wouldn't quite say as rough as our last one, but it's still pretty rough. The difference here is that this layout actually has G-forces and is intense, which would be good if it wasn't rough. The combination of how rough this ride is, along with elements that actually give forces and whip you around a bit, makes this ride an extremely painful experience. You may not have as much of a headache as something like Mighty Canadian, but you sure will have bruises. Except that you actually probably won't now, because good job King's Dominion, you updated this ride. But it was too late for me, because I rode it when it was terrible. Coming in at number 4 on this list is my least favorite wooden coaster of all time, and the third wooden coaster in a row, Hurler at Carowinds. Hurler is just about as rough as Grizzly was, and has just as bad of a layout, but it's not even in the woods, and it just, I don't know, it manages to even be more boring, but still somehow significantly more painful. Maybe it has to do with the fact that it was 90 degrees when I was riding this, but I don't know, this was just the most miserable experience I've had on any wooden coaster by a long shot. There isn't even really too much to analyze about this ride, it's just a bad wooden coaster. And the most interesting thing about this ride is how they haven't RMC'd it yet. Like seriously, Hurler at King's Dominion, which I've heard is just about as bad as this ride, was RMC'd and became Twisted Timbers, a ride that is popular and everybody likes. This ride is not at all popular, nobody likes it, and Carowinds is just, Cedar Fair likes it a lot more than does King's Dominion, so the fact that this ride still exists is shocking. So, as with every other bad wooden coaster, RMC it please. Coming in at number 3 is Mind Eraser at various Six Flags parks, more specifically Mind Eraser at Six Flags America, but I'm using the Darien Lake POV because that's the only official one. It's Vekoma SLC. Next. Okay, I'll explain. Vekoma SLCs, or suspended looping coasters, are super rough and awful inverted coasters that have okay enough layouts, but often horrible trains and some of the worst headbanging on any ride ever. The Six Flags America one, which may be getting removed, I don't know, it's not on the park map anymore and it's missing, so good riddance hopefully, but that one felt like it was literally falling apart. And okay, I don't hate these rides maybe as much as some people do, but they just give you a giant headache, and unless it's Fly the Great Nor'easter, just you can't enjoy any of the admittedly okay elements on the ride without just being in severe pain. And I know I've been saying a lot of similar things for all these rides, but being painful and giving headbanging and roughness is just what makes the coaster bad. Oh boy, it's ride footage that looks like it was taken in the 1920s, which must mean it's the only official POV of Vortex at Kings Island, which is my number 2 least favorite coaster. This is easily the selection on this list that is going to have the most controversy, but I absolutely hated this ride. It has all the issues I mentioned with Anaconda at number 9, except all of those issues are even more exemplified. This ride is taller, faster, longer, which would be great on most coasters, but on an Aero custom looper, and a bad one at that, it is not so good. The layout is just sort of random inversions, the track is not smooth at all, and the restraints are what ruined this ride. I am about average height, and on most Aero custom loopers like Anaconda or Carolina Cyclone that give you headbanging, it occurs around the temples. The problem is, on Vortex, it occurs at the ears, which is so much worse. Every time this coaster shakes or goes through some janky turn or helix, it is pushing down on your ear and it just slams it into your head, which is infinitely more painful than it just hurting your head. Why people were mad about this ride closing and have fond memories of it, I have no idea. Maybe at opening it was tolerable, but if you rode it in like maybe the last probably 10 years of its life, this ride is just insufferable. And the worst part, it's not number 1. No, Terranet Fantasia Land is not number 1. I just like to give some dishonorable mentions. In no particular order, they are Runaway Mine Train at Alden Towers, Tempesto at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, Carolina Cyclone at Carowinds, Kitty Hawk also at Carowinds, Corkscrew at Cedar Point, Wild Mouse at Dorney Park, Wild Cat at Hershey Park, Impulse at Knoebels, Predator at Six Flags Darien Lake, and Runaway Mine Train at Six Flags Great Adventure. Now that those fun ones are done with, let's see what number 1 is. Green Lantern at Six Flags Great Adventure is the worst ride I've ever been on, no question. Green Lantern is another B&M stand-up similar to Vortex at Carowinds, except somehow even worse. The layout is significantly longer and you go a lot faster on this ride with a lot more intense elements, which just increases how uncomfortable it is because the track is super shaky and you're standing up. The thing is, both times I rode it, the mid-course seemed to be either off or not working well, which would be great on most rides as you get more airtime and laterals in the second half, but this ride, it just makes everything go faster, which means your head's getting slammed against the restraint even faster and harder. I struggle to even comprehend why this ride has any fans at all, because it does, but I just find no enjoyment from this ride at all. Both times I rode this ride, yes, I had to ride it a second time, I got a major headache afterwards that kind of ruined the rest of my day at Six Flags Great Adventure. I don't know why they have this. It's a relocated Kentucky Kingdom coaster, so like, I don't know, just tear this thing down. It's garbage. But not only is it garbage, it's also my number 1 least favorite coaster of all time. Thanks for watching a video about me complaining for 13 minutes straight. Make sure to smash that subscribe button if you want to hear me be angry more.